Hey butterflies, welcome to my comic verse. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today I want to get into the X-Force series. I was so hyped when they finally mentioned alchemy, and we're now seeing how Krakoa is an enemy from another perspective. So everything I've been saying is now being pieced together and coming to light. But I'm going to start with issue 4 when they talk about Hercules. God knows I love my mythologies and analogies, but this story actually sets the perfect foundation, not just with Beast, but the entire series as a whole, because it brings it back to balance, which is a necessity for alchemy. So they focus on the lack of feminine principles. And I'm going to try to keep it surface level for now because this is a prominent topic in Marauders, and that's how I see Emma Frost. She's not here to play any games. She's here to usher in the matriarchal system, the feminine energy, the right brain, and the power which uses emotional intelligence, even though Emma isn't necessarily balanced in her emotional scale, right? So this also ties in with the intro or preface of issue 4, which states that there's this group of people who reject, the Xeno group, who reject the mutants' history as victims. Sounds very familiar. So it's that imbalance that doesn't provide someone the tools within them to have the basic understanding of the mistreatment of an entire human or mutant kind. So, in the story of Hercules, he hides in fear that humans would be jealous of him and try to kill him. And he didn't fit on the earthly plane, so he began the 12 labors, a series of tests that the demigod had to survive. And when his true nature was revealed to him, he hoped to become divine and achieve immortality. So, I've mentioned the Underworld many times, and this is another version of that. In the Underworld, there are 12 divisions that a person must overcome, which is just going through different parts of you that govern particular aspects of self. And this is why the chakra system is a good blueprint, okay? If those aspects are ruled by fear, then you don't survive internally because there's no balance. So you, or Hercules, would not survive as a god because those aspects are not fully recognized or actualized. In other words, if the fear can get to you, then you're still operating in the physical, restrictive mindset. And that directly opposes the God mindset. Recognition of our God self is only one step. Integrating it in an authentic way is the true test because that need for power, which is the patriarchal system, tends to poison the mind. And we see this reflected in like everything. And sometimes on that opposite scale, there's the person who doesn't want the power at all, right? So you are Hercules. We're all Hercules. We all have particular talents, gifts, or just a way of being that's different. And it tends to manifest as a weakness when we aren't aligned. And I'm not getting into Wolverine this video, but he's an example of that. In his series, he's battling his weaknesses, and in X-Force, we see that he's transitioned and has made it his strength. So when we shift to higher levels of awareness and consciousness, we tend to feel more alone naturally because as much as there will be people who resonate with the same levels of pain, the experience is unique for us. And when we go through the 12 divisions, we do that alone as well. And just like Hercules, there's a lot of us who don't feel like we belong in the earthly planes because we just feel so different. And that feeling is heightened when it's combined with higher levels of consciousness because we are now more drawn to the energetic and unseen realms, right? So everything can become a reflection. And like I said, our weaknesses become our gifts. And that includes being a human on earth. That is also our gift. So the way I see it, we first recognize the God within us, and that begins the journey of ultimately wanting to express that energy, that divine energy in a state of flow. So we go seeking the light, and in order to fully embody that light, we first have to face the darkness that may hold any blockages. And this is when more things get snatched from you and things fall away. There's more destruction in the beginning path of building an empire because the foundation needs to be set. And this is why the root chakra is the first, because it's important to be grounded, rooted, and stable. The root chakra rules the realms of fears. So when we go searching for light and facing ourselves and any demons that are there, it's important to be in yourself, love your physical body and the gift of the physical world, which is all root chakra energy. So that's the test of the underworld, right? The 12 labors of Hercules. Are you fully balanced enough to make it out alive? And to me, that means, are you balanced enough to make it out aligned, right? Evidently, in the representation of the alchemical process, there's something called the circuit of heaven, which represented as the cosmos. And this is the opposing force of chaos. And they actually mentioned chaos and cosmos in one of the other issues or series. I can't remember which one because I've read all of them, but I'll go into detail about chaos and cosmos with that if I cover the issue. But in the center of the circuit of heaven, there are three alchemical principles: salt, sulfur, and mercury. And through the journey to achieve a completely new spiritual life, which is the journey of the underworld, the three then transforms into 12, representing a complete cycle, the 12 zodiac signs. And the more you dive into these topics, the more you see that they're all connected. Just like the three components of alchemy that represent the four elements, there's the 12 zodiac signs that are also connected to specific elements. And if you don't know yet, to put it as simply as possible, there are 12 houses in our birth chart, and they're each ruled by a different sign, so we actually embody each sign at some place of our houses. And it's funny to me because I feel like the oversight of the entire birth chart that we embody different energies is a direct reflection of real life, right? We get so caught up with our ego, which is the sun sign, the main sign that we identify with, that we neglect all these other aspects of self. So anyways, using the planetary energies as a blueprint for self-navigation is also helpful. But like I said, it's all just a blueprint to help us navigate through our own realms so that we can transcend our fears. And it's not about, not having fears, but having enough faith to know that your courage is stronger. But just another side note about astrology, because they do mention the concept of as above, so below in House of X. And as much as I say it's all a blueprint, there is a mathematical system in astrology, and it's like a code to reading what is happening in the as above. So, anyways, they say that Hercules almost perished if it wasn't for Athena, the goddess of wisdom. He was the muscle and she was the mind. And remember, the micro is always a reflection of the macro, and that applies with our energies. And I've spoken about this in previous videos. We all have a masculine and feminine within self to unify and keep in balance. And then there's the external relationships we have between feminine and masculine, because we generally carry an overall frequency of one or the other, no matter the gender. So for example, Hercules is the muscle, but it's not like he lacks mind. Just like Athena is wisdom or mind, but that doesn't mean she lacks muscle. But sometimes when we're out of touch with those aspects, it's the external people that kind of come in and facilitate that missing energy, and we're either going to battle with it or eventually be receptive to it. So Beast and Jean are playing out these roles, but I'll get more in detail with them in the next video. So I'd like to make a clarification that Hercules is actually the mind and Athena is wisdom. The masculine is associated with the mind, they compartmentalize, they're analytical, and they rationalize. The feminine is associated with wisdom, which is also the mind, but the wisdom of the feminine operates through the heart's mind because it is a mind of its own. This is the battle between the left and the right brain. Women are naturally more equipped to multitask these roles, and we generally mature ahead of the masculine, and this is also experience within self. Usually we're powered through our identity because we're taught that it's a dog-eat-dog world. You have to obtain power by taking control, and being vulnerable means being weak. These are all patriarchal ways of thinking that get amplified when we are standing strongly in the masculine while ignoring the feminine. And of course, there can equally be an imbalance with the feminine, and she can be very manipulative. And we've seen that with Jean as the phoenix, right? Not that she was manipulative, but she was ready to just wipe out everyone. And that's because she's basically described as an empath, people who are able to tap into energies and feel the depth of love. They're equally capable of feeling the depth of darkness. Just like water, water signs are seen as the most sensitive, but people tend to forget what the ocean is capable of. And just in that same way, the feminine energy has the ability to inspire both fear and love. So there is a choice to be made when we experience those depths, because we all experience darkness, but not all of us allow ourselves to feel it. Maybe you just block it off and it goes away, but then those are then the blockages that mislead us later. Because when this happens, sometimes we think we're operating through our heart space, but because the heart has been so neglected and suppressed and hasn't been able to fully feel, experience, or express, there's a lack of alignment. Because in order to fully grasp the wisdom of the heart, to be tuned into the intuition more clearly, we have to be able to feel the bad just as much as the good. So we have to be able to navigate through the depths of that darkness with feeling alone, while feeling alone. So the feminine principle is all about flow, but that doesn't mean that she isn't about power. But where the masculine is all about action and he can become overworked, overwhelmed, and in his head constantly, this is where the feminine says relax. Don't you know that you don't need to obtain power because you are power? So can we breathe for a motherfucking second, please? Because the abundance that you're trying to claim is never going to leave. But if you want to live in that anxious energy and in a sense create more obstacles, then that's a journey that you'll have to take. They say the heart is where the home is. The heart is where we find self, our authentic self. And when we stand in our true essence confidently, the amount of power in that, it can only be felt. Not to say that the power of the feminine is only unseen and felt, but I'm just amplifying this because feeling and embodying a vibration basically sums up the law of attraction and how we manifest. The feminine's wisdom knows that there's enough for everyone, and she's confident enough to know that it can't be taken from her. And in that flow, she naturally attracts more to her. And this is why both energies need to work together. They're supposed to be intertwined as yin and yang. They're constantly interacting with each other, but they've become opposed. There's this imbalance where the consciousness of the masculine is elevated over the feminine. So we tend to focus on competition, assertiveness, individuality, ego, and logic while ignoring the feminine. So now there's environmental issues and poverty because they've shifted into the mindset that you have to starve in order for me to eat. It's a dog eat dog world, right? Which to me translates to God eat God world. They've brainwashed society to continue thinking animalistic so that we forget the gods that we truly are. So as we embrace that mentality of dog eat dog, the further we stray, no pun intended, from our God self. The God self is aware that we're all connected and we're all one. And I addressed this in House of X when I spoke about the flower of life. So back to my point, the imbalance of these energies on a large macro scale is seen through capitalism, racism, misogyny, and so on. And the sacral chakra is also the feminine center. It's the womb, the creative energy. And this is also where emotionality and sensuality comes from. So there's all this production, but it's not balanced with creation. Bringing it back to House of X, and the overall theme of what's happening through the series is, how balanced are you? How aware are you of your God self? And have you done the work to integrate to the point of expressing through creation of some sort? Now, going back to the first chakra, the root chakra, it's associated with the masculine energy. So this is where our fears are faced, like I said, and we make sure we're rooted in who we are so that we stand our ground. We feel stable and secure in taking that action that's needed. So the sacral feminine draws from the root. But if the root is imbalanced, it's the feminine principle that helps heal. It's allowing the fears to flow, to surrender, and to explore it with self-compassion and forgiveness. Feminine is all about surrender, and the first half of the X-Men issues revolved around how all of these people were unable to surrender, so I'll get into that if I go there. But anyways, it's not about analyzing the fear 10 times over, because that's a part of it, but we tend to get stuck in that and just trying to figure it out when all there's left to do is feel it out. But we are focusing on the feminine because the patriarchal system has had its run for so long. And this power struggle is slowly crashing down right before our eyes, slowly but surely, both in real life and in Krakoa, whether you are aware of it or not. And because the masculine has been elevated for so long, the feminine is fed up, right? We're kind of on the opposite polarity right now. We see this play out in the macro and how the feminine has struggled to feel like she has to keep up, to feel like she has to think like a man in order to be empowered. Because there's been so much oppression with sexuality, it's like we want to claim the role that has oppressed us, right? And whatever you choose to do, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying these are the things to think about because they're influences that we don't register consciously. And going back to the sacral chakra, the type of energy we allow into our womb does matter, especially for a healed feminine, because it is a healing center, and that's a whole nother topic and subject. But we talk about energies affecting us so much, and somehow sex is kind of overlooked. So my point is there's a need to balance both within and externally, production and creation, analytical intellect and emotional intellect. So this imbalance between these energies is the cause of the power struggle. And this is all perfectly summed up with Apocalypse and a statement that humans aren't worthy of power. Every empire fall begins with a peasant's hunger, and it's the feminine energy that subsides that hunger. So this also leads into the human versus mutant battle. So I spoke about polarity in detail in the Wolverine videos, and we see there how there's this reflection between vampires and humans or mutants, where they're asking us how different are the vampires really? And now they're asking the same thing between humans and mutants. Humans aren't worthy of power, but oh, the mutants are? And then they're like, don't compare us to human institutions, but how different are they really? Then Nightcrawler says, there needs to be a moral compass for this mutant CIA that is X-Force, and Mystique says there is none. So I'm going to leave it at that because this topic is one of the foundations for the entire series, like I said. So I'll get into the characters more specifically in the next video, especially Beast and his trifling ass. So thank you, butterflies, so much for spending your time with me today. Make sure you check in with your masculine and feminine, the left and right brain, the brain and the heart, the root and the sacral, so that they are intertwined and interacting and not opposing. All right, thank you, butterflies. Stay fly and free, and I'll see you next time. Bye.